Fabian Stokes pressed the scanner to the barcode, listening for the quiet beep that confirmed yet another case of tomato soup was logged and accounted for. It was after midnight, and the brand new MarketMaven was still more construction site than grocery store. Yellow plastic drapes hung like ghostly skin across the windows. The air was heavy with the sharp tang of cleaning solvent, fresh paint, and that odd, raw scent of concrete dust that seemed to hang in the lungs like cobweb. Every surface gleamed in artificial light. Shrink-wrapped counters, shelves packed with untouched boxes, and the pristine expanse of linoleum, just waiting to be dirtied by eager opening day feet. Fabian was alone except for the distant echo of a forklift somewhere in the bowels of the loading dock, its engine whining, then settling into the mechanical sigh of hydraulic brakes. Occasionally he heard the muffled shouts of the night crew, slang-laced laughter that bounced from the breakroom to the shadowed corners of the freezer aisle. He moved in a slow rhythm, scanning and stacking, filling out his clipboard with an aching meticulousness. Sleep was something that belonged to other people tonight. The manager wanted the whole produce section finished by dawn. Fabian rolled his shoulder, feeling the damp weight of sweat cling beneath his collar. He kept moving, because movement was the only thing staving off the bone-deep weariness threatening to drag him down. At 2:18 a.m., by the digital clock, its blue glow smeared by a greasy fingerprint, he heard a crash. It wasn't close. The sound came muffled, like thunder underwater, but it was enough to freeze his hand as it reached for a pallet of onions. He waited, listening. The silence after the crash was too long, too complete. Then came footsteps. Fast, irregular, the hurried stomp of boots moving where boots shouldn't be. The walkie-talkie clipped to his belt crackled, then hissed back into silence. Fabian bent to adjust the last case, tucking it into the shadows behind the cooler, but his mind was miles away, on the city outside, the rumors of sick people downtown, the way everyone had stopped shaking hands that week. He wished he hadn't thought of it. The fear was a thing with teeth, and once it bit, it didn't let go. The forklift's whine came closer, its headlights cutting two white lines through the draped plastic at the end of the aisle. The driver, eyes ringed in red, waved as he passed, grinning with the feral energy of too much overtime and too little sleep. Fabian waved back, half-hearted. Then, as he knelt to retrieve a stray can from beneath the lowest shelf, he heard the scrape of metal and the sudden, wrong lurch of weight. The pallet above him, a teetering tower of shrink-wrapped soda, carelessly stacked for speed, shifted with a low, grinding moan. He didn't have time to shout. The driver, eyes on his phone, reversed without looking. The edge of the pallet caught Fabian just above the temple. Light burst behind his eyelids, jagged, electric, sharp as shattered glass. The world tilted. The blue clock flashed 2:19. The night swallowed his name. Blackness pressed in, deep and heavy, stitched through with murmurs of memory. The cold seeped in first, chilling the skin of his cheek where it met the slick linoleum. The taste of iron. The distant, arrhythmic thumping that could have been his own pulse or something mechanical failing in the dark. Time dragged past in slow convulsions. Light, thin, artificial, sickly, filtered through his eyelids. He blinked. Pain speared through his skull, then dulled to a nauseous throb. The air was different. No hum of machinery, no distant shouts, just the sound of his own ragged breathing and the periodic drip of condensation into the mop bucket nearby. Fabian pushed himself upright, fingers trembling, smearing a streak of blood across his forehead. His left eye pulsed and blurred. The clipboard was gone. His watch read 5:03 a.m., but the world outside the plastic drapes might have run ahead by centuries. The silence was absolute. He staggered up, moving with the aimless logic of concussion, and shuffled along the edge of the cooler aisle, listening. No footsteps. No forklifts. The distant beeping of a reversing truck had stilled. Somewhere, an automatic air freshener hissed its citrus warning into nothingness. He called out once. Hello? The word was absorbed, muffled, returned only by the hollow echo of space. He tried again, and this time the store itself seemed to answer, plastic sheeting shifting, something settling, a soft metallic creak from the ceiling struts. Nothing human. Fabian wandered, slow at first, then faster, voice raw, moving from the freezer section to the empty bakery, from locked emergency exits to sealed loading bays. The staff entrance was chained and padlocked, a heavy plank across the inside as though expecting siege. He pounded on doors until his fists ached. He kicked at plywood, rattled handles, searched for a way out. His phone was dead, of course. The charger at the register was gone, the sockets dead or powerless, nothing working except his own rising panic. The air felt tighter, thick with the chemical tang of cleaning solvent and the faint, coppery whiff of his own blood. He circled back to the produce section, to the place where the clock glowed dim and blue and indifferent. He counted his breaths, forced them slow, and tried to remember the last time he'd seen another person. He sat for a long time, cradling his head, listening to the world fail to answer. Sometime later, an hour? A day? He began to catalog what was real. The aisles, silent. The skylight, painted over for the opening. The exterior doors, locked and boarded. All the grand opening banners and blackout sheeting still covered the glass, sealing him in. But near the loading dock, past the stacked crates of soda and the promo displays, he found a flaw, a thin line of brighter darkness between two boards where the night crew hadn't hammered flush. He pressed his face to it, breath fogging in the chill. Outside, through the inch-wide slit, the world flickered. At first, nothing. Then, as his eye adjusted, flames, ribbons of fire leaping from the top of a car, or what used to be a car. A shudder of gunfire, faint but unmistakable, rattled the air. Shadows ran in all directions, figures darting, stumbling, then falling and not getting up. Screams. No words, just the raw, animal shriek of something being hunted and not wanting to die. The supermarket, fortress and tomb, was an island in an ocean of violence. Fabian's fingers tightened around the edge of the wood, as outside, the world ended over and over in flashes of fire and bursts of darkness. He kept his eye pressed to the crack until the burning daylight peeled away from the sky. The fires outside shifted but didn't stop. Every so often, something would stagger across his narrow line of vision, lurching and malformed, sometimes moving on all fours, sometimes upright. Their outlines were human, and yet they weren't. He tried not to blink, swallowing each gasp of fear until it threatened to choke him. He lost track of how long he watched before pulling back, forehead beading with sweat despite the air-conditioned chill. He needed help. Needed to know if anyone else had survived, if the city's skeleton crew of first responders might be on the streets, if there was a plan. He circled the aisles like a caged animal, mind spinning through everything he'd ever learned about disasters on the news, in books, from TV. Phones. The store had them everywhere. Wired landlines behind the service desk, cheap prepaid cell phones hanging in thick plastic by checkout, even the loud, wall-mounted emergency handset in the staff office. He tore the shrink wrap from a display cell, slid trembling fingers down the battery hatch, and snapped in the pre-charged pack. He tapped at buttons, eyes darting to the windows as each small chirp echoed across the cavernous aisles. No bars. No signal. The emergency call flashed and failed, repeating, mocking him. He ripped more phones from their packaging, tried again. Nothing. The landline was dead. When he pressed the cold plastic receiver to his ear, he heard only an unbroken dial tone that sounded like the drone of an insect, never connecting, never changing. The wall phone's line had been physically snipped, maybe construction, maybe sabotage, he didn't know. The world outside was static and flame, and inside, the silence roared. He scavenged for something, anything, that could bridge the divide. He tried the store's old laptop from the office, its login screen still set to a smiling corporate manager. No Wi-Fi. He thumbed through every locked-down network setting, every hidden admin mode he could guess, but each login prompt was a wall. He considered the radio in the breakroom, a boxy thing built for background music, and cranked the volume until the speakers hissed. It spun through static, then a single, frantic voice, nothing but numbers, repeating, and then even that faded, replaced by the relentless thumping of interference. He tried the PA system, whispering his name, Fabian Stokes, trapped, help. But the speakers only played his voice back to him, cavernous and small, and the noise of it made his hands shake. He killed the power, cursing himself for every watt spent, every risk of being heard. The world beyond the glass responded only with more screams, closer now, and a thunder of something massive slamming into metal, shaking the building to its bones. He moved in circles, not caring now if he was seen, just desperate not to be alone. He left messages scrawled on printer paper and taped to the windows, black marker bleeding the words, "In here. Please help. Survivor inside. Anyone?" He crouched behind the service desk and watched as dusk seeped through the cracks. Night made the fires outside burn brighter, their reflections flickering across the waxed floor. Every so often, a gunshot cut through the silence, then another, then the rapid-fire percussion of something automatic. When the exhaustion broke over him at last, it left him shivering and numb. He drifted to the furniture aisle, collapsed into the softness of a display mattress dressed in gaudy blues and golds, pulling a blanket around his shoulders that still smelled faintly of plastic. His breath hitched in his throat, and he pressed his face into the pillow to muffle the sound. The tears came slow at first, then faster, hot, aching, endless. He let the grief wring him dry until there was nothing left but trembling silence. The fires outside painted the ceiling in flickering orange as Fabian cried himself to sleep, alone in a palace of abundance, surrounded by a world that no longer cared to listen. He woke every day to the gray blur of panic, breath shallow, heart jackhammering beneath his ribs. Each dawn arrived as if dragged behind a truck, raw, battered, relentless. The store's clocks blinked the hours in cold digital increments, but time itself unraveled. Days bled into nights, and nights dissolved into a shrill, restless nothing. Fabian roamed the aisles with wild hope and growing desperation, attacking every machine or scrap of tech as if it might suddenly reach a friendly voice. He pounded on the exit doors until his knuckles split, wrenched fire alarms and emergency call boxes from their mounts, and tried again and again to jury-rig the store's radios with anything metal and copper he could scavenge from the hardware section. He even found a rack of children's walkie-talkies, cheap plastic, decorated with cartoon astronauts, and shouted into them from every corner of the building, only to hear himself echoing back, small and far away. Sometimes, in the depths of night, he would stand beneath the ceiling vent by the freezer section and scream his name up into the darkness, as if some cosmic rescuer might be listening in the ducts. But the only answer was the buzz of distant transformers and the ever-present howl of sirens far beyond the parking lot. He watched the world outside through his secret crack, clinging to any flicker of movement that might mean rescue. Once, a battered police cruiser skidded by, lights dead, dragging something twisted in its grill. Once, a group of people in rags sprinted past, clutching weapons, one stumbling and falling as a pack of shadows swarmed. More than once, something inhuman pressed its ruinous face to the glass, sniffing, listening, eyes glinting with a mad, hungry light before stumbling away into the ruined streets. Inside, the air thickened with the rot of fruit and milk, the sweet staleness of pastries abandoned for too long in their cheerful boxes. He'd eaten ravenously at first, shoveling cakes and pies into his mouth in the trembling, animal hope that food might stave off despair. He raided the candy aisle at dawn, crushed a whole box of donuts by lunch, and still found himself gnawing on crusts at midnight, the taste turning sour in his mouth. He didn't notice the passage of time until he caught the first whiff of decay. Bananas collapsed in black puddles at the bottom of the produce display, cheese sweating and glistening beneath the plastic, bags of salad turning to green soup. The waste hit him with a sick, shameful clarity. He was burning through supplies like a doomed tourist, eating as if rescue were just one more day away, letting rot claim what might have kept him alive for months. The bakery was the worst. Whole racks of untouched bread, dozens of sugar-dusted croissants, sheet cakes painted with "grand opening" slogans, now spattered with mold and crawling with flies. He'd wandered among them for a week, grabbing what he could hold, stuffing himself, and yet letting more than half spoil without thinking. It was on the seventh night, after another failed attempt to wire a satellite radio to the store's rooftop panels, after another silent, hopeless vigil at the window crack, that Fabian finally stood in the ruined bakery and saw the truth. The world outside was not coming back. The food was not infinite. Rescue was not on the way. The doors were locked, and so was time. He stared at the crusts of bread, the green-laced frosting, the empty candy wrappers scattered at his feet. Then he sat down, back against the cold, humming oven, the lights blinking overhead, and let the silence close in around him. He spent a morning just standing in the bakery's ruined sweetness, the stink of rot and sugar thick in the air. The truth felt cold and sharp in his gut. If he wanted to live, he would have to become a different kind of animal. The world of aisles and endless shelves was over. From now on, he was an invader in a sacred tomb, and every crumb had to be preserved. Fabian started with the shelves. At first, he just stared, rows and rows of color, order, bounty. He wandered through them with a basket, pulling cans and cartons, boxes of cereal, bottles of oil, and stacking them on a display table near the staff elevator. He found the strongest totes and bins in the home goods aisle, heavy plastic tubs made for college dorm moves and flooded basements, and tested each for cracks and weak points. Trips up and down the freight elevator became his new ritual. Down in the boiler room, the air was close and warm, the walls sweating with a slow, steady trickle of condensation. It smelled of dust, old copper, and a deep, faintly metallic tang that reminded him of childhood basements. Down here, noise was swallowed. Down here, even gunfire and sirens barely reached. He slept his first night in the dark, huddled against a rolling toolbox beneath the boiler's humming pipes, blanketed by a pile of unsold fleece throws. When the morning came, he felt invisible, armored by concrete and distance. The next day, he scavenged the store for anything that could make this new den more secure. He dragged heavy furniture over the elevator entrance, moved a half-dozen fire extinguishers down for defense, and stacked pallets against the maintenance stairwell, leaving only a narrow path for himself. He sealed up every vent with towels and duct tape, and stuffed a roll of weather stripping beneath the steel door. The whole place became a bunker. With the boiler room chosen as his new sanctuary, Fabian turned to storing his food. He rolled carts piled high with boxed dinners, canned vegetables, peanut butter, and powdered milk down the elevator and organized them into neat stacks along the back wall, creating a pantry with all the order and pride of an old-world chef. He sorted everything by expiration date, oldest in front, freshest in back, and kept a spiral notebook tally for every category. He found 4 long, deep chest freezers in the appliance aisle, new, glossy, untouched except for showroom dust. With a crowbar and a dolly, he worked them into the elevator and wrestled them down into his lair, lining them up like coffins along the wall. He set up a stand-up fridge and a freezer combo next to them, running a heavy-duty extension cord to the maintenance outlet, keeping the power draw minimal. For perishables, what was left, anyway, he raided every display fridge and deli case in the store, hauling blocks of cheese, butter, trays of chicken and steak, cartons of eggs, milk, and the last of the fresh vegetables into the big refrigeration units nearest the elevator entrance. He consolidated everything into just 2 of the biggest walk-in coolers, shutting the rest off and locking their doors. He left the rest of the store dark. He'd already seen the ceiling lights stutter and flicker, whole aisles blinking off for minutes at a time. The MarketMaven's solar and wind panels were never meant to shoulder the whole grid, not with half the city dead and the lines cut. So he flipped every breaker in the box except for those that fed his little bunker, just the basement, the closest fridge, and a single security camera he left on for company, its red light blinking dimly like a faraway signal star. In the aisles above, he swapped the bulbs in the emergency lights for deep red and blue, barely a ghost of a glow at night, almost impossible to spot from the outside through the boards. He never left a light on for more than a minute in the store proper, and never twice in the same place. For now, he rationed 1 can of beans per meal, half a cup of rice at dinner, a sliver of meat or a wedge of cheese, water from the emergency supply. He counted his meals, made his notes, and arranged every shelf with the exactness of a man building a future out of numbers. If he was going to survive, it would be by his own rules. Down in the humming dark, Fabian began to believe he could outlast the storm. The days folded in on themselves, every hour measured by the methodical shifting of goods from shelf to bunker. Fabian carved out routines. Morning rounds, inventory, cautious meals, silent treks through the frozen shadows of the upper aisles. But there was one area he hadn't yet explored, the garden center. It sat at the far end of the building, behind a chain-link gate adorned with springtime banners, half in, half out of the main structure like an afterthought. He waited until dusk, when the store's dim emergency lights made the shadows long and safe, and crept down the center aisle with a cart for supplies. The garden center's double doors were glass, but painted over for the grand opening, so he paused before unlocking them, pressing an ear to the seam and listening. Only the thrum of wind outside, the low groan of the roof beams. Inside, it was cooler, damp air heavy with the tang of fertilizer and mulch. Rows of potted seedlings, stacked bags of potting soil, fertilizer, weed killer, spades, rakes, trowels, gloves, knee pads, even a rack of sun hats and children's butterfly nets. Above, the greenhouse ceiling was painted in cheerful murals, a lie of bright skies and endless spring. He moved quickly, loading tools, sacks of coal, starter fluid, bags of wood chips and charcoal, anything that could burn or seal or patch. There was a stack of emergency propane tanks and even a crate of seeds, squash, tomatoes, beans, sunflowers, all glossy in their bright packets. He swept them into his cart, mind already skipping ahead to next season, soil, sunlight, water. Hope, somewhere far off. The last thing he checked was the soil, half out of habit, half out of curiosity. He slit open a bag, expecting the heavy, earthy scent of earth. Instead, the odor was wrong, sweet and sour, almost chemical. The soil itself looked odd, not just dark but tinged with a grayish shimmer. He jabbed a trowel into the bag, and the soil shifted unnaturally, almost liquid, rippling around the blade like jelly. At the center, something twitched, thin white threads, writhing slowly, recoiling from the light. He dropped the trowel. The movement spread, a ripple of motion passing through every opened bag. In the garden beds, the topsoil itself shifted, as if something far below were breathing, slow and hungry. Fabian stumbled back, skin prickling, the hair at his neck rising. A new fear burned through him. This was not rot, not fungus, not anything he'd ever known. He snatched up the last tools he could carry, left the seeds, and backed out of the garden center, heart slamming in his chest. He locked the gate, jammed a steel rod through the frame, and sealed it with a length of bike chain. He wiped his hands again and again on his jeans, but the crawling sensation lingered. Back in the store, he threw the cart's contents into a pile and pushed it all the way down to the boiler room. The seeds, he stored in an old ammo box. The soil, he left untouched, mind racing with questions. Hydroponics, maybe. Someday. But not now. Not with that thing out there. He told himself he'd figure it out, but he never set foot in the garden center again. There were enough mysteries in the world without digging up new ones. For now, he made do with what he had, and the knowledge that even the ground itself could no longer be trusted. Fabian filled his days with tasks that hovered between routine and ritual. Each morning, he paced the aisles, clipboard in hand, inventorying every can, every box, every jar with the bureaucratic zeal of a lost quartermaster. He'd browse the electronics section, watching DVDs on portable players, old action films and baking shows flickering in the gloom, the laugh tracks and chase scenes echoing through empty lanes of cereal and detergent. When boredom pressed in, he built things. Barricades from furniture and bags of dog food, makeshift barricades at every exit, tripwires rigged from fishing line and jingle bells filched from the holiday aisle. In the garden section he'd once dared to enter, he rigged a silent alarm, just in case anything from outside ever tried the gate. He spent long afternoons in the auto section, puzzling over how to armor the store's floor model sedan with shelving and mannequins, sketching diagrams of golf carts hauling wagons, the lines looping with ideas for steel plating and flamethrowers made from aerosol cans. The fantasy of escape gave him purpose, even if his heart never quite believed in it. Sometimes he raced shopping carts down the frozen food aisle for the thrill, or stacked soda cans into pyramids only to knock them down. In quieter moments, he sat on the checkout counter, tossing a ball against the wall, eyes drifting to the boarded-up windows where slivers of dusk crept in, reminding him of the world that had kept moving without him. Days passed in this pattern, chores and daydreams, endless meals, private jokes with the mannequins in sportswear. He set up a kitchen in the employee lounge, microwaving frozen dinners and gorging on snacks, then walking the empty store for hours, talking aloud just to hear another voice, even if it was only his own. But the trash grew. It started as a single bag, then a heap, then a mountain in the storage hall behind the breakroom. Food wrappers, empty cans, bones, the picked-over remains of meals eaten in distracted solitude. Some things he threw out half-eaten, crusts, wilting salad, leftover pizza slices growing stiff and cold. There was a strange comfort in the waste, the sign of his continuing life in this mausoleum of plenty. Then, one evening as he hauled another bag of refuse to the mountain, he stopped. He looked at the piles. Half-eaten sandwich, crusts, a wedge of cheese too soft to finish. He saw the cookies he'd let go stale, the oranges too shriveled to bother peeling, the leftovers scraped from plates because he could always get more tomorrow. A cold knot formed in his gut. What if he couldn't? What if the day came, sooner than he wanted, when the shelves were empty and the only thing left was this heap? Would he pick through it, desperate and ashamed, hoping for a crumb? He looked at the trash as if it were a future version of himself, staring back, gaunt and hungry. He sat down hard on the cement floor, surrounded by refuse, the store silent except for the distant hum of the basement fridges. His mind circled the idea. There had to be a way to save it all, to make every scrap last. To keep from becoming the kind of animal who ate from his own garbage. That night, as he cleaned his plate, Fabian didn't throw away a single thing. He set the leftovers aside, eyes lingering on the row of dehydrators still in their boxes along the back wall of the appliance section. Something new and electric sparked in his mind. Preservation. Maybe he could save more than just food. Maybe, just maybe, he could save himself. He cleared a path through the basement and rolled in a pair of stainless steel metro racks from the bakery. Shelves at eye level became hot tray staging, fresh scraps stacked on silicone mats, waiting for their turn in the dehydrators. The lowest shelves held airtight polymer bins, color-coded with spray paint he found in the crafts aisle, blue for meats, green for vegetables, yellow for fruits, red for anything spiced or sugary that might draw insects. Cardboard wasn't safe enough, so he raided the automotive section for 5-gallon HDPE oil drums, scrubbed them with degreaser, rinsed them twice with bleach, then lined each one with cut-down Mylar turkey roasting bags. Oxygen absorbers came next. Steel wool shaved into filaments with a box cutter, sealed in coffee filters alongside a spoonful of table salt, the slow-rusting wood scab and joe. He taped those packets inside each drum before cinching the Mylar with zip ties and hammering the lid tight. Every batch exiting a dehydrator cooled for exactly 20 minutes, timed on a kitchen egg timer whose ding he could hear through half the store, before he cracked vacuum sealer rolls into custom pouches. If the scraps still bent, back they went for another cycle. Only when they snapped in half cleanly did he allow them into the sealing queue. He double-sealed the seams, then dipped the corners in melted candle wax for an extra moisture lock. Shelf-stable powders became his obsession. Coffee grinders from the appliance aisle pulsed jerky shards into granular, protein dust, mixed with dehydrated onion, carrot flake, and salt. He funneled the powder into single-serving straw packets, heat-sealing both ends, perfect for dumping straight into boiling water. Flour buckets repurposed from the bakery held larger volumes. He stored them in a rolling tool chest whose drawers he desiccated with silica gel scavenged from every shoebox in the store. Heat management took trial. Running 8 dehydrators at once tripped breakers and spiked basement temps above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. He solved it by wiring an old HVAC bathroom fan into the maintenance duct, vending warmth up through a defunct cosmetics display on the ground floor. To mask any exterior glow, he wrapped the dehydrator towers in blackout curtains sewn from clearance blackout drapes, leaving only a 2-inch breathing gap at the floor. Waste never left the cycle. Bones simmered overnight in a stockpot on a single induction burner, low wattage, to leach every bit of fat. The liquid gelatin he reduced to syrup, spread onto parchment, and dried into savory sheets just brittle enough to snap. Vegetable ends too fibrous to chew became brew bricks. He crumbled them into muslin tea bags for a kind of garden broth. Even eggshells were baked, crushed, and jarred as calcium supplement. He logged everything with a salvaged barcode scanner and an unplugged register. Each jar or pack got a printed price label repurposed as a date code, month, day, year, weight, and tray number. All scanned into the till at night so the running total of calories and portions flashed on the dusty screen. A yellow sticky above it read, "Live by the numbers." Within 3 weeks the process ran on muscle memory. Morning. Collect scraps, rinse, slice. Noon. Rotate trays, vacuum seal cooled batches, file to bins. Evening. Audit stock, change absorber packs, wipe down gear with vinegar. At lights out he'd stand amid the humming chorus of dehydrators, every shelf stacked, drums sealed, labels crisp, and feel the uneasy comfort of a factory that existed for one man alone. Clockwork, precise, ready for a future he still wasn't sure would come. The sedan came down from its display plinth in a squeal of ratchet straps and a controlled slide of plywood. He'd dismantled 2 fitting room mirrors to use as makeshift ramps, greasing their backs with cooking oil so the wheels wouldn't catch. Once the car was on the tile, he rolled it, battery unhooked, tires showroom fresh, into the tools aisle where every socket set and hydraulic jack waited like obedient footmen. Steel shelving became armor. He unbolted uprights, cut them to size with a cordless grinder, then drilled pilot holes through the fenders and doors, riveting panels on in overlapping scales. The paint job vanished beneath layers of matte gray and dented chrome. Gaps he stuffed with bathroom silicone to muffle rattles. He pulled headrest posts, sharpened them on a belt sander, and welded them along the front bumper in a crude cow catcher array. A plexiglass riot shield, liberated from the sports section's personal safety demonstration, replaced the driver's side window. The golf cart was trickier. Its frame couldn't carry plate, so he raided the camping section for carbon fiber tent poles and wove a skin of conveyor belt rubber around them, hinging the panels with zip ties so they flapped rather than cracked under impact. He mounted the cart's battery bank on a quick-release sled scavenged from a sliding tool cabinet and wired in 2 marine deep cycles he'd rescued from the garden tractors. By moon glow spilling through the roof seams, he daisy-chained a set of fold-up solar mats across the cart's roof, sealing every junction with heat-shrink tubing and nail polish lacquer. Fuel, he solved with caution. Propane tanks nestled where golf bags once rested, each plumbed to a salvaged camp stove burner aimed rearward. Flip a valve, strike a lighter, and the rig would spew a curtain of fire for a dozen yards. He practiced the motion again and again, twist, spark, duck, counting off seconds until muscle memory embedded the sequence deeper than fear. Spare parts filled the trunk of the sedan. Belts sorted by length, wiper fluid repurposed as fire accelerant, a crate of fuses arranged like chocolates in their plastic tray. Ratchet straps laced the car and cart together at 4 reinforced points. Pull a single red cord and the connections would shed like snakeskin, leaving each vehicle free to maneuver. Evenings ended with him standing at the mezzanine rail, overlooking his empire. Below, the sedan and the cart crouched side by side beneath the emergency lamps, angular, brutish, ready. Beyond them, crates of vacuum-sealed rations climbed the walls, labels bright under flashlight sweep. Meat mix 14, root veg 22, protein dust 11B. Everything had a place. Everything obeyed. Admiration warmed him at first. Here, alone, he had built factory lines, armored columns, disaster cuisine. The humming dehydrators in the basement were timed to the second. The vehicles gleamed with improvised menace. The store itself was a citadel of canned thunder. He caught himself smiling, almost proud, entangling a length of paracord like a tailor threading silk. But pride bled into a quieter question. Why do all this if you never drive out? He found no answer on the clean ridges of armor plate, nor in the precise rows of rations. The answer hovered behind his ribs: leave. Every welded seam, every sealed pouch, every sharpened headrest was a vote for escape. The thought struck harder than the pallet ever had. He'd grown fond of the orderly silence, the predictable hum. Here, the world behaved. Out there, it howled. Yet every improvement pointed outward: road, horizon, risk. He imagined the sedan's engine rumbling, echoing through the empty aisles, the garden gate chain snapping, daylight pouring in. He imagined steering into a street littered with ash and bone, no voices to greet him, just wind. Loneliness seeped up through the concrete. He sat on the sedan's hood, tools cooling on the floor, and listened to the store breathe, compressors cycling, lights ticking down to dark. His chest ached with the weight of all he'd made and the simple truth beneath it. A fortress is only a waiting room if there's no one to defend. The notion settled heavy, a bruise behind his sternum, and he stayed there long after the emergency lights dimmed, hand resting on cold armor, staring at the automatic doors that no longer opened for anyone. So he doubled down on the fortress on wheels idea, telling himself that when everything was indestructible the fear would shrink. First came the tires. He drilled vent holes through each sidewall, pumped them full of expanding construction foam, then wrapped the tread in overlapping bands of motorcycle chains soaked in grease. Run flats that could chew through glass, bone, or curb without losing shape. He bolted spare rims onto welded struts at the rear quarters. If a wheel sheared off entirely, the struts would skid like sled runners until the chains caught purchase again. The sedan's passenger doors he replaced with a single welded box frame platform, 3 feet wide, skinned in 6 layers of shelving steel. He left a waist-high parapet all around, cutting narrow vision slits no wider than 2 fingers. Inside the box he mounted a salvaged tripod and a .308 belt fed he'd liberated from the sporting goods gun cage. The feed trays swung on a pivot so he could reload from inside the cabin or from the platform itself. A junk swivel chair, bolted through the floor and locked in with chain, gave him 360 degrees traverse. He tested it by spinning until he was dizzy, brass casings clinking onto the tile. Up top, he cut the roof away in a clean oval, then welded 2 stadium seats back to back on a reinforced ring. Fore and aft he installed pintle mounts. One held a pump shotgun with a 20-round drum, the other a scoped hunting rifle on a recoil-damped yoke. Each seat got a 5-point racing harness scavenged from the auto aisle, because someday, he told himself, passengers might matter. The entire skin of the sedan vanished beneath quilted armor. Shelves, frying pans, even a stack of cast iron skillets riveted into the driver's side door where the engine block couldn't shield him. Between plates he packed fiberglass insulation soaked in silicone, poor man's spall liner. He sloped the hood with a welded wedge of lawn tractor hoods so anything fired at the windshield would ricochet skyward. The golf cart trailer evolved into a rolling pantry. He welded angle iron outriggers all around, decking them with pallet slats and cross-braced pipe. To handle the new width he scavenged a pair of ride mower axles, grafted them to the corners, and linked the hubs with bicycle chains to keep the wheels spinning in unison. A plywood box, spray foamed for insulation, sat amidships, sized to clamp 3 garbage cans side by side, each one packed with vacuum-sealed meals. Over that he built a thin catwalk so 2 riders could crouch, rifles braced on the rail. Inside the cart's cockpit he bolted down 2 salvaged cinema seats, cut firing slits in the rubberized sidewalls, and mounted a battery-driven spotlight on the hood wired to a thumb switch. Above, a salvaged kiddie pool frame became a turret ring. An angle grinder and perseverance opened a circle through the roof panel, Into that ring he set a swiveling lawn chair base and lashed a modified nail gun, harpoon, launcher, carbon dioxide propelled, ready for entangling tires or pegging ropes across alleys. Power tools became contingency weapons. A cordless reciprocating saw strapped beside the driver's seat for cutting free of wreckage. A pair of 60-volt chain saws racked just inside the platform hatch. A leaf blower converted to spew powdered chili and glass shards if mobs pressed too close. He wired quick disconnect leads from the sedan's alternator to recharge every battery pack while driving, and clipped laminated checklists to the dash. Safety pins out, generator offload, ammo cut over, in fluorescent marker. Weeks blurred. Every fresh plate welded led to a new imagined vulnerability. Engine fire? Bolt-on extinguisher cages. Gas bomb? Vent the cabin through dryer duct valves. He'd finish an improvement, step back in satisfaction, then freeze, picturing a different disaster, and lumber off for more steel, more bolts, more wire. One night, standing beneath the fluorescents he'd left burning over his work bay, Fabian stopped mid-stride. The sedan squatted like a siege engine, chains glinting, gun barrels peeking from shadows. The cart loomed behind, fat with provisions. His perfect mobile redoubt. All of it pointed toward the barricaded doors. And suddenly he knew. Every rivet, every weld, every checklist was a confession. He was building to go. No amount of armor masked the fact that beyond those doors waited a silence he could never fill alone. The thought hollowed him. He set down the torque wrench, listening to its clink echo across empty checkout lanes, and felt, for the first time in months, the smallness of his own voice in the great dark store. The rig was ready, he was not. He gutted the sedan's trunk, welding in a shallow steel tub lined with thermal blanket. Above it he mounted a hinged grate and a collapsible camp mattress that could unfold into a narrow bunk. A salvaged vent fan, powered by a brushless motor the size of an apple, circulated air through 2 layers of HVAC filter so he could sleep without inhaling diesel fumes or burning propellant. Beneath the mattress he stowed a folding chemical toilet in a sealed ammo can, its charcoal-impregnated filter vented through the rear quarter panel. For water he plumbed a pair of roof rack kayak tanks, 30 gallons each, into the headliner, routing flexible tubing to a manual pump over a stockpot sink welded where the glove box had been. A fire-resistant blanket snapped across the windshield interior. At night it doubled as blackout curtain, at dawn as radiant heat shield. LED strips along the ceiling, wired through dimmers scavenged from the lighting aisle, bathed the cabin in a soft amber that wouldn't ruin night vision. The cart became pantry and workshop. He installed sliding drawers for spices, vitamins, water purification tabs, bundles of cutlery wrapped in rubber bands. One drawer held nothing but rolls of duct tape, cable ties, and tubes of epoxy. Another hid a collapsible fishing rod, soldering iron, miniature solar solder station. A final drawer, reinforced in steel, housed a battered paperbacks library, field surgery, edible plants, diesel repair, and a dog-eared anthology of jokes torn from an office calendar. He bolted a diesel transfer pump to the rear bumper, wired it to spare batteries so he could siphon fuel from derelict cars without leaving the driver's seat. Along the sedan's roofline he lashed a row of scavenged solar path lights. By day their tiny panels flickered to life, charging internal cells, and at night the LEDs glowed dim blue, waypoints he could switch on to find his rig in blackout terrain. The last addition was psychological. A pocket-sized chalkboard lashed beside the dash. Each dawn he erased yesterday's tally of days alive, and chalked a new number, then underlined it twice. It made the cabin feel less like a coffin. Weeks bled into months until the store felt smaller than the armored beast crouching in its belly. On the final morning, he walked every aisle one last time, palms on cool shelf metal, breath fogging in the hush. The mannequins in sportswear stood as silent witnesses. He saluted them with a wrench, climbed behind the wheel, and keyed the ignition. Batteries clicked, relays thunked, and the engine snarled. He thumbed the solar cutoff, kicked the generator choke, felt the rig rumble through every plate and weld. In his mirrors, the golf cart pantry shivered, storage wheels straight and true. He shifted into first, eased toward the loading bay roll-up. Steel groaned when bumper met door. He eased back, gunned the throttle. The wedge hood punched forward. Sheet metal shrieked, hinges burst. Light, searing, real, poured through the flowering crack. He mashed the pedal. The door ripped free, skittering up its rails. The sedan leapt out, tires clawing over plywood barricade and the still hanging grand opening tarp. Plastic banners exploded in red and yellow confetti. The cart followed with a metallic howl. Outside, the sky was bruised with smoke. Buildings sagged like rotten teeth. In the street, forms lurched, bone-thin torsos, arms bowed the wrong way, eyes reflecting a dull, animal hunger. Some turned at the engine's roar. One sprinted, jaw hanging like wet cloth. Fabian downshifted, chains rasping, and surged forward. The bumper caught the runner mid-stride. Crack of bone, spray of grayish tissue, and the body cartwheeled beneath the chassis without slowing him a beat. Ahead, the avenue lay cracked and buckled, cars canted at odd angles. Flames licked from an overturned bus, scorched trees clawed the sky. He kept the wheel straight, steel plates rattling, solar lights buzzing faintly in the smoky daylight. Behind him, the shapeless figures converged on the supermarket's yawning wound, their screams drowned by the rising growl of his engine. Fabian never looked back. He pushed the rig to 30, 40, 50, the city blurring at the edges. The fortress was behind him now, shrinking in the mirrors until even its banners vanished into the smoke, and the road unfurled ahead, broken, unknown, merciless. Exactly as he'd built his machine to meet.